Okay, thanks for joining, and I think we'll get started. Hopefully, people that join as we move along will be able to um, get this. It's a little bit of a complex, difficult topic this time, but I think it's definitely worthwhile. And as we'll see, we'll hopefully connect and tie into many different aspects of this time of year, things perhaps that are occurring around us these days, the parasha, of course, and Chassidut and positive psychology. So this week's parasha is actually two, right? There's two parashiot, Tazria and Mitzorah. And in the second parasha is really where we'll be focused. But the truth is that there is this major topic throughout both parashiot of the tzarat. Well, some, maybe translate as leprosy. We're going to try to avoid that, and we'll use what's just a translation of an eruptive plague. Some sort of plague that is on the skin of people, as we'll see, could be on clothing and on houses as well. And throughout the parasha, it describes what to do when that happens and the whole process, going to the Kohen, but it doesn't really explain why it happens. Although the Chachamim, right, in the Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral law, our rabbis have explained to us that there are a number of reasons why this could come on a person or their belongings. And the most famous of them is Lashon Hara, right? Gossip, evil speech. But there are others too. In any case, what I really want to focus on right now is the first source over here from Parshat Mitzorah, which talks about Tzarat Habayit, the plague that affects the house. So, God forbid, if you can imagine a house and its walls, and there's little dots start to come up on the walls of the house. That's called Tzarat Habayit. So the first source, the pasuk, says like this: Ki tavo eretz Canaan, when you enter the land of Canaan, asher ani noten lachem achuzah, that I will give you as a possession, v'natati neged tzarad bebeit eretz achuzatchem, and I will inflict an eruptive plague upon a house in the land you possess. Okay, seems pretty straightforward. However, in contrast, let's compare for a second to the introduction pesukim to the other types of tzarat. I mentioned earlier that some of them could be on person's skin, could be on clothing. Let's see the language over there. Maybe one of us also can point out what they see in the pesukim to be different over here by the tzarat of the house. So if we go down to the next source, this is by a person. When a person has on the skin of his body a swelling, a rash, discoloration, and develops into this tzarat, it shall be reported to Aaron, the Kohen, or to his sons. Again, look at the beginning of the pasuk. Adam ki obesaro. When a person has on their skin these dots. Next one. V'isha isha kiyevo naga verosh ovizakan. When a man or woman has an affection on the head or in the beard. Again, kiyevo. When this affection, this plague takes place. Another one. This is by the clothing. V'habeged kiyevo naga tzarat. When an eruptive plague or affection occurs in a cloth, beveged semer or beveged pishtim, a cloth of wool or linen fabric. So we see something specific in the way the Torah introduces the other types of. It says ki yebo. When this could happen, or if it happens, what is different again about the introduction about the Tzarat Habayit? When you come to Canaan, v'natati neged tzarat, and I will inflict the tzarat. I'm wondering if anybody could point out or see a difference in the grammar of the pasuk and the way it's introduced. Anybody want to take a guess, or anybody think they can see the difference? Okay, well, Let's keep our minds thinking. Oh yeah, Jason?
Well, I mean, on the first pasuk is basically has to do with Eretz Yisrael. When you come to Eretz Canaan, I don't know if that's the preamble that introduces the piece that's going to happen to your house, as opposed to the other things are specifically related to the body, the clothing. So it's that's the only thing I'm noticing.
Okay, excellent. So there's actually a couple things that are different, right? So one is the focus on entering the land of Canaan, right? Which is not mentioned in other places. Great, thank you, Jason. So what's the connection? Why specifically over here? And I'll add another thing, and that is that it says, and I will inflict, vinatati, as opposed to other ones that say, when this should occur, implying that it could have happened, it could not happen. The pasuk by the Tzarat Habayit seems to imply that Hashem is telling us that this will happen. I will place upon you a neged tzarat on your houses. Why? Why does the Torah say that? Is the Torah really telling us that that's news, that's information? This is going to happen to us? It's destiny? It's going to happen? And if so, why specifically by Tzarat Habayit? So this is where we're at. Again, first of all, why does it say, like Jason mentioned, about entering the land? And second of all, why does it seem to imply that it's going to happen? So let's go now to the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law. The Talmud in Masechet Horayot brings actually two opinions about this to figure out. Why is it saying Vinatati, and I will place it upon you? We have a machloket, we have an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Yehuda says, you know why? Bisura hilahem. It's news, right? These are tidings. This is information. Shenagaim ba'im alehem. That an eruptive plague will come upon them. Yes, it will happen. That's what we said, and that's how Rabbi Yehuda understands it. Rabbi Shimon Omer, no, he disagrees. Prat linigei onsin. It's coming to exclude that when the nigaim, the plague, the tzarat, comes beyond somebody's control, meaning that it comes from physical cause, something which is not related to a spiritual punishment, that's not considered tzarat. When it comes to tzarat habayit, it has to be vinatati, that I, meaning God, has placed it upon them. So it comes to exclude tzarat that comes from other reasons. Now the Gemara there goes on and explains how that is, or what the other causes could be that are not spiritual, not from God, but that's how he understands it. We won't get into that right now. So I want to share with you a very interesting midrash. This is where we're starting to get into the depths of our class today. And this midrash we'll see soon who brings it in our parasha. Uchtiv, and it says, this is from Midrash Rabbah. It says, V'natati neged tzarat, Tani Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia taught, V'chi b'sorahi lahem shenagaim ba'im alehem. Is this news? Is this information that God is telling us that eventually the destiny is that we will have these plagues coming on our houses? Tani Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai will celebrate his yahrzeit and very soon in Lag BaOmer. He said, "Kevan sheshamu Kanaanim sheYisrael ba'im alehem." Since the Canaanites heard that the Jewish people were coming, amdu v'itminu mamonam b'batim b'sadot. They hid all their money, their jewelry, their gold. They hid everything in their houses, in the fields. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, God said, "Ani avtachti lavotem shani machnis b'neihem l'eretz meleah kol tuv." I promised the Jewish people that when I bring them into the land, they will come into a land full of plenty. Shenemar batim leim kol tuv, as the pasuk in Dvarim says. So they're going to come into the land and they won't have anything. They won't find anything, since the Amorites hid everything. Ma Kadosh Baruch Hu says. So what did Hashem do? Migaren nigaim beveito. Basically, he sent this plague of the tzarat into the house, v'huso tro, and then he would have to break it down. Umotsebo simai. You find the hidden thing, the treasure. In other words, that through the tzarat, there's a process that we'll see the psukim later on. After you report it to the Kohen comes. What happens is that eventually, in certain circumstances, if it's still there, you would actually have to take apart, break down the house, all the stones, and then rebuild it. As you take down those stones, says the Midrash, there is going to be the hidden treasure, the property, the gold, the money, the jewelry of the Amorites that they hid, you will find it. And that is another explanation. That is essentially the Va'ani Tatin. I will place the plagues in explaining a little bit of why, for what purpose. Now, just as a side note, I found it very interesting, actually. This is totally not the main focus, but just in terms of the names, I found it very interesting. Before Rabbi Shimon in the Gemara was the one who said, not like this, right? Rabbi Shimon said a different explanation. It was Rabbi Yehuda who was the one that said that this is a tiding, this is informative, that we will have these plagues on our houses. And in the Midrash, which is also a Tanaic source, it brings Rabbi Shimon, but it's the same Rabbi Shimon. It's supposed to be, because Rabbi Shimon in the Mishnah, without a name, is usually Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So it seems to be interesting that the one who's explained down here, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, is actually giving a different explanation. I'm not sure why that is. It could be that the opinions got flipped. Maybe his opinion was Rabbi Yehuda's, but that's just an interesting side note. In any case, in our parasha, you can find this in Rashi. Now, the Rashi brings a very short version of this. V'natatin getzerat, again, the same issue, that negaim, these plagues will come. Again, why? Because the Amorites concealed the treasures and the gold in the walls during the 40 years that we were in the wilderness. And through breaking the walls, we will eventually find these treasures when we come into the land of Israel. How, though? Only through the Nigaim, the plague of the Tzarat that will afflict our houses. Please, Vakasha, we have a question.
Well, but the word that's used, that it's a nega, and that it implies that there's a negativity, at least in the word. If in fact, right, there's in essence a golden lining, right? Wouldn't that perhaps there would be a different word that would be used to describe this affliction? It might be like as you say, a hidden treasure, as opposed to a nega.
Right. So are you saying that essentially the nega is something which should be a little bit more positive then?
Well, listen, last I heard, when your house gets broken down from a hurricane, and Baruch Hashem, you found a little golden spoon in that the builder put it in there. Okay, that's all sweet. I'm happy for it. Maybe it's even a golden brick, but still your house has been broken down. And also, I mean, is it completely negating the whole idea that this tzarat, this mold that's on the house, really is something that frankly, I mean, the whole idea that you can expect that it's going to be there is a little problem. It's difficult, right? But all along, it seems to me that there's a negative connotation. But what you're saying, or not you're saying, what this is saying is like, wait a second, no, this is actually a good thing. Gamzula Tova.
Okay, so thank you, Jason, for that. The truth is that we're kind of heading that way in terms of your question with some of the next sources. So I hope that as we move along, it will address what you're saying. So thank you for that transition. So as we transition to the next source, it actually ties in, as I said in the beginning of the class, we'll try to tie it into things that are happening around us, the time of the year. So the time of the year, this week we just had Yom HaShoah V'Gvura, the Holocaust Remembrance Day, and one of the Hasidic masters who was in the Holocaust, experienced the Holocaust, Rabbi Kalman Shapira, Hashem Yikam Dimo, actually murdered in the Holocaust, and he was in the Warsaw Ghetto. Wrote many books, and unfortunately, many of them, we don't have. But one of them that we do have is the Eish Kodesh writings. I don't know if you can see this. This the Sefer itself, and they are his drashot, his sermons that he gave to the people, his Hasidim, and those that were with him in the ghetto. Now, the following one is from this week's parasha, and it also happens to be in 1940. So it's rather earlier in his book of the drashot that we have. But look what he says. So I have it in Hebrew, but I'm going to try to go through it and translate and explain. So in the first one, the paragraph, he brings our pasuk, Ki Tavot Kenan, and he brings the Rashi that we saw. Amazing. The second paragraph, V'navin na'im kain. Let's try to understand. And again, this is a summary of what he said to his own people in the ghetto. Lama izgira mitchilat habayit shiva yamim, v'rak achar kach chaltzu ta'avanim. Why did the Torah tell us that we have to have the house closed for 7 days, right? What happens is that after this is reported to the Kohen, we evacuate the house, and then only later they take down the house, they take out the rocks and the stones and take it apart. Hakevan shenira henega yada shekan matmon. According to the logic of the Midrash and Rashi, what we just saw before, once the Jewish people saw the Negaim, and they were told, right, essentially, this is the idea of the Midrash, that they would know that there is something in these walls. Why wait the 7 days? Why go through the challenge of being out of your house, not having a home for that period, and for essentially that hardship of that whole week? Why not just go straight for it? Why didn't Hashem just tell us, here it is, take it? And then he goes on to say, and especially according to the Ramban, who says this is something which is beyond natural, right? This tzara is not something which is just going to happen. So if it's beyond nature, why can't Hashem just say, here it is, and just open it up for us? This is his answer. It's a little deep, and we hope to try to explain as best as we can. V'nei, and behold, b'chavanat Torah mitzvata en lanu hasaga. First of all, we have to understand that we can't truly, fully understand all the intentions of God's will in the Torah. Some things are beyond us. But it's possible that we can at least try to understand what maybe it's alluding to or hinting to. Because we know, we believe everything that Hashem does for us, even when, God forbid, he punishes us or he hurts us, everything is for the good. And don't forget, he's talking to the people in the ghetto. He's giving a Shabbos drasha. But when we look around now and we see that it's not only about the Yisurim, right, the challenges, the suffering of our bodies, but it's also affecting things that distance us from Him. What does he mean? He explains. There's no school here, right? We can't go to school now for the kids. Below yeshiva, right? And the people can't attend the places of study. Lo beit midrash yitpalel b'tzibur. We can't daven with a minyan now. Velo mikveh. And God forbid, there's even challenges to go to the mikveh when needed. Domen, similar challenges. As chas v'shalom, so God forbid, safek chashash ola b'kirbenu. Then we might have this doubt inside of us. Efshar shegam ata kavanoto yitbarach tova. Is it really still a tova now? If it was for good, if it was really a tova, shouldn't he be challenging us with things that make us closer to him? And not causing us to have bittul Torah, not being able to study, not being able to pray with minyan or go to my local synagogue and be part of the Jewish community and be part of what actually brings me closer to him. Maybe this is just like challenges and travails and suffering of Vayashlichem. It's a pasuk from Devarim, means that God just left us. He threw us to the galut, the exile, and that's it. But he's distancing us from him. In other words, the Eish Kodesh was telling the people with him, he's saying, it's one thing when we feel that we're having our personal challenges or things that maybe affect our bodies. But when it comes to spiritual challenges or things that affect our community and our local communal institutions where we connect with him, how does that match with that L'Tovah? And that bring me closer to him? We want to pray, we want to say Tehillim, but we can't because we can't even go to shul now. As much as you try to do that on Zoom, it's not always the same. Therefore, Torah is coming to tell us that there was a period of 7 days of impurity, very challenging time. And in any case, he used those days as a message, as a shlichut for the good of Israel. Only 7 days had to go through, and only after that the treasure was revealed. Then he goes on to explain, this is why we only have to say kinega. It's like a nega. Jason, coming back to your question before, that a nega is making a statement that this is 100% negative, 100% evil. But if you look back at the psukim, it says kinega, as we'll see very soon. Because essentially he's saying, we can't say that imi bemet nega opega. We can't fully understand everything that's happening to us. It appears to us this way. But really, essentially, there is something deeper here. There's some good here beneath. Even in the situation where it's affecting our spiritual connection as the way that we see it, at least, that we cannot have schools, that we cannot have the shuls that we are so used to at this time. Just want to show you the psukim here. I want to continue though, but these are the psukim that talk a little bit about how we have to wait for 7 days and then take apart the house. So before we continue, I want to just that was very deep, and I want to make sure that we're not simplifying this. We have to understand that when we learn Eish Kodesh, one of the challenging things is that he was in the Holocaust, and it's very hard, and I'm not here, I don't think any of us are here to compare or to say that one challenge or one suffering is like another. Obviously, that's not the case. But when we learn Eish Kodesh, and one of the reasons that it was written, not just for his generation, was that hopefully we can learn from the Torah and what it's trying to hint to us. It's not just a storybook. The Torah is not just a book of laws. The Torah means a guide. It's a guide for life, for generations. Generations, places will have different challenges, and people, we can't obviously compare, but there are messages to be learned which we can. On a deeper level, what I think the Eish Kodesh is trying to share with us is that when we have the opportunity to look at challenges that come to us, even when we think that they're distancing ourselves from God, we still have to dig deeper. We still have to understand that perhaps there is that gold that's hiding deep down. And it takes time sometimes. That's why the 7 days are there. It's time, it takes patience, and also it resembles that things are more complex than we actually think. That being said, there's a lot to take this, of course, in terms of the positive psychology here. We can talk about hope, we can talk about resilience, we can talk about religion, which is a big piece of how to be happier in terms of positive psychology. But I actually want to focus on something which comes from a book which I highly recommend, and we'll talk about it in a second. But within it, it's called The Role of Suffering. The Role of Suffering is actually, this is not from the book itself, it's from an article online, but this is from Tal Ben Shahar, which is one of the leading professors at Harvard. And in fact, if you Google what was the most popular course at Harvard, it's actually his positive psychology course. And with everything going on at Harvard, everything people are studying, this is the most popular one. And it's about happiness. Just very brief, as you can see his name, right? He actually was born in Israel, lived a little bit as a child in South Africa, went back to Israel, went to Harvard, and I believe he's back in Israel these days. I don't know if we have time to go through the whole thing. It's getting a little bit late, but I'll try to go through as much as we can. While it's part of our universal nature to seek pleasure and avoid pain, right? We want essentially to avoid pain. Culture plays a central role in how we deal with suffering. In the West, we try to basically reject it. We see it as unwelcome interruption of our pursuit of happiness. So we fight it, medicate it, we search for quick fixes. In some cultures, especially in the East, suffering is acknowledged for the important role it plays in people's lives in the meandering path toward enlightenment. Wisdom from the experience of suffering emerges, it stems from suffering. When things go well, we rarely stop to ask questions about our lives. A difficult situation, however, often forces us out of our mindless state, causing us to reflect on our experiences. To be able to see deeply, to develop what King Solomon, making a reference to the Tanakh, referred to as a wise heart, we must brave the eye of the storm. Brings an interesting quote from Helen Keller. In her lifetime, she suffered a lot, as well as also had joy. She notes, character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, vision cleared, ambition inspired, and success achieved. One of the most significant benefits of suffering is that it breeds a deep respect for reality for what it is. While the experience of joy connects us to the realm of infinite possibilities, the experience of pain reminds us of our limitations. So here he's going into a second step, which is understanding our limits. When despite all our effort we get hurt, we are humbled by constraints that we sometimes fail to notice when we're flying high. It seems to be more than symbolic than when in ecstasy we often lift our head up to the heavens, to the infinite. And when in agony, we tend to cast our gaze down to earth, to the finite. Look what he did. I just found this the other day. He actually, writing a positive psychology article, mentions a Hasidic master. Another one, right? Rabbi Pashischa, also a Polish Hasidic, but about a century earlier. He says, this is pretty well known, you may have heard this before, that we all need to walk around with 2 slips of paper in our pockets. The first should have the words from the Talmud, for my sake the world was created. The second slip in our other pocket should be from Bereshit, Genesis, I am but dust and ashes. The healthy psychological state resides somewhere in between the 2 messages, a balance, right? Somewhere between hubris and humility. In the same way that the synthesis between hubris and humility breeds psychological health, combining ecstasy and agony establishes a healthy relationship with reality. So positive psychology is pointing on 2 interesting points about what we can do when there are these hardships. One, essentially, is recognizing that it causes us to stop, to reflect, to look. Sometimes when things are flying high, we just continue going, right? We're on automatic mode. We're just going and going and going. But the hardships actually get us to stop and think and to reflect. Number 2, as he says, it reminds us of our limitations. Here we think we can do everything and everything's in our hands. We're very powerful, but there are some things that just remind us, little particles, little pieces of a virus that can transfer, can actually change the world. I am but dust and ashes sometimes is important to realize that we have to have this balance of what we could do, but also to realize that it's not all in our hands and we need that siyata d'shmaya that help of God. I know it's a little bit past our time, but those who wish to say, I'm going to share a few more words from another Hasidic master as I want to really develop this a little bit further. The Yismach Moshe is another Hasidic master, also earlier from the 10th, from the 18th century into the 19th century, a Hungarian Hasidic Rabbi, who on our parashas, I think something fascinating. In the parasha, in our pasuk, he connects it to another pasuk from Tehillim, Ayin Gimel 73, where it says, "Ach tov l'Yisrael Elokim leborei levav." God is good to Israel, and he uses the word Elokim, which we'll talk about in a second, to those who have levav, right? They have hearts. What does that mean? So he says, "Yesh lefaresh" here at the end of the third line, "Kelokim shehudin." We have to work at the word. God has different names that resemble different attributes, the way that we perceive him. So Elokim represents judgment, din, as Ado, Nai, that that represents Rachamim, mercy. It's a deeper Kabbalistic idea, judgment and mercy, different attributes. Elokim represents judgment. So what he goes on to explain here is that in the pasuk when it says that the Elokim that represents judgment is Tov lebarei levav, those that have hearts. What does that mean? So I'll read a little bit over here. Gam ken tov Yisrael ki Yisrael avei shemo kol ma David rachman letav avid. Right? Everything that God does, it's for the good, is what people say. But not so fast, guys. Rak zo im heim barei levav. It's only if you are a person of a heart. The Hainu explains, Zach libam b'emunah. We make sure that you work on the purity of faith, v'libam nachon batuach b'Hashem, and really able to work on that heart which could have confidence and secure in God. Shakol tova. I mean, you have to work on it. You have to really make yourself part of the process. It's not automatic going to be litova, for the good. In other words, what we're saying is, it's bad. Things are bad. Are they going to be for the good? Not necessarily. Somebody has to do the work. If you just let it be as it is, that's not enough. These are the famous rabbis who we learned this idea from. Then, if you process, if you do the work, then it will turn into for the good. But just on its own, it doesn't necessarily, right? Challenges on their own don't necessarily bring good. There needs to be work and deep work and inner work of the heart. He brings it back to our parasha. Look at this, beautiful. And this is, he says, a support for this idea. The placing that nega, as we said, in the walls of the house. And it looks like it's a plague. And it's really terrible, like we said. And our rabbis really told us, because at the end there's something which is very deep and complex, but there's something good hidden there. What the Amorites hid. But based on what I just explained, what he means by this is that what I explained above, that work needs to be done though in the meantime. It's not just that you're going to have the dots on the walls and then everything will be good. It's not just that 7 days will pass by with challenges, with being in isolation, and everything will be okay. Work has to happen. You have to turn yourself into the bar levav. Now, maybe the positive psychology could disagree or agree or help us here. Let's see another, and this is our final quote. I think this would really, I really appreciated this sentence over here. So in his book itself, right, Dr. Ben Shahar actually says the following. Look at the beginning. Well, I do not believe that things necessarily happen for the best, right? So it sounds like, essentially saying that maybe gamzo litova or kol litova is not necessarily something that he believes in. As a scientist, as a researcher, as a positive psychologist, but then he adds the following. I know that some people are able to make the best of things that happen. So not necessarily that things happen for the best, but you have the ability. Every single person has the ability to make the best of things that happen. I think that perhaps this can connect to what Yismach Moshe was saying. And I want to add also another element, which the Yismach Moshe didn't talk about. The Pasuk says Ubar Levav. It doesn't say Bar Lev. People who are familiar with the Talmud and Brachot remember that in Shema, the Shema we say, right? It says if to love God, right? B'chol levavcha. And the Gemara asks, why did it say livavcha? Just say libcha, right? What's this extra bet? We have two hearts, livav, it should be libcha. Gemara says, well, to serve God we have two components to us, right? We have good and evil. The Yetzer Hara, Yetzer Tov, there's complexities. It says in Yeshaya, we kind of fix this in the Tefillah to make it sound a little bit better, but in Isaiah it actually says God creates good and he creates the Ra, the evil, right? There is a balance in this world of evil and good so that we can have complete free will. And it's up to us to take that and to make, unfortunately, the worst of it or the best of things. That's deep, deep work. Bar Levav, with the Pasuk of Sivor, it takes work and sometimes a lot of reflection and a lot of patience and a lot of focus. And beyond our time, he gives a lot of exercises. And I hope at a different time to do a little bit more of the how. This sounds very philosophical, but how do we do that? I hope to do that in one of my future shiurim. But right now, just the idea that we have the potential to make these challenges and to take them to a step where they're not just stam, they're not just because they are, but rather we can make the best of them. Hardship, which we would never voluntarily invite into our life. Nobody wants hardships. We actually say in the tefillah every day, please God, don't give us challenges, right? Rav Kook explains beautifully in the Gemara that we would rather grow and be the best we can without those. But sometimes they come. When they do come, they can play an important role in our development. And he finishes, a struggle-free life is not always the best thing for us. So challenges are tough. We don't necessarily want them. Nobody wants to be in a situation where it's tough. But essentially, if we have the ability to stop, to pause, to reflect, to learn, to see what things can possibly happen, how can we make the best of this, then hopefully the treasure which is there is not going to waste. It's actually there so that we can achieve something through the challenges and make the best of things that happen to us. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Any questions or thoughts?
Yashikar, you really put it together. Really, that was great.
Baruch Tiyeh. Thank you. Jason, in terms of your question, if we're going back to Israel, I didn't really tackle that one, but my assumption, perhaps my guess maybe is that going into Israel was a big piece of it, right? Meaning that there's going to be a lot of challenges. We're not just going into Israel on our own, right? We have Hashem with us, but it's up to us now. There's going to be wars, there's going to be challenges, and that was part of the prep. And why Davka over here does it say it? Maybe like the Eish Kodesh was saying, because the house represents our institutions, our Bate Knesset, our Yeshivot, our Midrashot, our Mikvaot. Those are going to be the ones that we would think, wait, challenges of those? Doesn't Hashem want us to have those Batim? Even there, right? That's where we might have a Safek, Emunah, as he said. And maybe that's specifically why he related it to houses and specifically coming into Israel. Maybe.
Right. The piece, though, that it's davka that it's going to happen. It's not a question. It's not a chashash, but it will happen. And that you have to actually know that you have to, sort of get ready for it almost. Like, or as Tal Ben Shahar says, right? They're going to happen. It's amazing that, that the pasuk is actually letting us know that in essence, right? don't think, it's very,
Right. And another book that he has about it's called about perfection, where he talks about different types of perfectionists, and he talks a lot about the concept of knowing it, like you're saying, it's going to happen. Like life is not perfect, and that is exactly what life is complex, and it's going to have those great times, those highs, and those lows, and those challenges. It's going to happen.
right. I have to tell you, I'm so appreciative that there's another, even, I don't know if you're calling this a pshat, but I mean that there's a whole nother look at. It's not all about lashon hara, because all those bar and bat mitzvah speeches that this is all about lashon hara,
How about this week's parsha?
Yeah. So it's at least okay. It's a breath of fresh air.
Right. It's a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a much broader. It's really a much broader take on it. It's impressive. I so much appreciate this. Thank you.
Yasher koach. Thank you for your support, for your feedback. The limud together.
I'm just glad that I finally found out that you're teaching.
Thank you so much. Good to see everybody. Good to see you, Amy. Take care. Thanks for joining so much.
Shabbat shalom.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.